It stood up, turned around and just stared at her. He felt like he saw something they weren't supposed to see. You know how much I love creepy things, and I often find myself in massive holes on the internet looking at weird sightings around the world. Even better if they're nearby and if they're Scottish. I love Scottish folklore, I love weird myths and legends, I love creepy things. I love it. I have a myths and legends video. I have loads of paranormal investigation videos. I have one on UFOs, one on the big grey man of Ben McDooey, one on the Loch Ness Monster. But in this video, let's talk about werewolves, dogmen, and the Scottish wolver. Oh, I'm actually quite excited. Scotland and the UK in general have a lot of weird paranormal cryptid type sightings. Werewolf or dogmen sightings have been going on for thousands of years, and even in Scotland there have been sightings in Shetland up to the early 20th century. That is until now. So you know that song? Do, 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 do. I love that song. There's a line in it that's really bad, but it goes, little old lady gave me a little last night, and it's just fun to sing, even though it's horrendous. Anyway, in one of my deep holes, I found this blog called Conspiracy, and there's a blog post on that website called Werewolves in London, and then I went on Instagram and I saw a post and it was a tattoo of the American werewolf in London. I'm sorry, is that not the biggest sign ever to do this video? I think so. But this blog, it's by an American in Europe, a professional writer and amateur photographer. The description says, in 2011 I saw a werewolf. I've spent a decade pretending it was just something I imagined, but this summer I was forced to face it. Werewolves are real and I'm worried something is happening. And they've shared photos and videos from around the world of these werewolf lichen sightings. I'm going to quickly read one of the blog posts. The one where they saw the wolf man, right? My sister saw it first. Look at that dog. This was not a rare thing for my sister to shout. She loved dogs. I looked up, expecting to see a tiny poodle or a smiling golden retriever tugging along its person, but there it was, all alone. No owner, no trailing leash. It was just standing there like it was waiting for something. I had the strangest feeling that it was waiting for me, and it became clear very quickly that it wasn't a dog either. It had the ears and the muzzle of a dog. I think that's what made my sister clock it like that, but it wasn't. I looked it in the eye and I just knew it wasn't a normal creature. Not an animal and not a person. There isn't any other way to describe it. It reminded me of descriptions I've since read about the not deer while lurking on cryptid forums. Creatures that look and behave just like deer until they don't. I know people will ask why I didn't take a picture, but this was back in 2011, so my cell phone's camera wasn't very good and I barely used it. It didn't even occur to me. We went back to my sister's house and we didn't really talk about it. We all knew what we saw, but I guess we all just had this fear that we saw something the others didn't. Nobody wanted to be the one to bring up the idea of a werewolf. So you've all no doubt seen like the typical werewolf descriptions, you know, like either someone gets turned into a werewolf because they've been put under a curse or they've been bitten by a wolf and then there's a full moon and they turn into this werebeast. We've all seen that, right? I love it. I think it is that one Goosebumps episode years ago that really like made me into that kind of thing. I just found it so creepy, and like the parents turned into werewolves and the kid was spying on them, and it just freaked me out. So where did werewolves originate? The word werewolf actually comes from the Old English word werewolf, were meaning man and wolf meaning, you guessed it, wolf. Lycanthropy, or the ability to change into a wolf, comes from ancient Greek, where it was discussed in mainly like clinical settings, but we won't go into that. So the origin of werewolf, it comes from all over the place, and that also makes me think that there is something in it, potentially. I don't know, it's me you're talking to here. But the earliest surviving notable literature, or the second oldest religious text, the Epic of Gilgamesh, which I read one day during the time of the month because I was like, I have to learn the history of the world. Don't ask. But yeah, the Epic of Gilgamesh contains this character, a wild man who people think was potentially the earliest recording of a werewolf. However, some other things I read debate this because you know, in the book or in the text, he doesn't grow up around wolves. Like, there's no howling or full moons or any of that. It's just a wild man. So a lot of people think that it's not actually werewolf related. Who really knows? Nobody will know for sure. Other ancient sources contain stories about wolf men, and it was really kicked into gear during the Middle Ages, when wolves were really common throughout Europe. And I know there are still countries that have wolves, but you know. But during these times, werewolves were kind of like witches. Like, men were killed because they were said to be werewolves. Kind of like witch hunts, but like were hunts. But let's specifically talk about Scotland right now, right? Because that's what I do. Also, please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. So the Scottish wolver is said to originate in Shetland. And it isn't like your traditional werewolf, because the Scottish wolver is said to be kind-hearted and dead nice. It's said to be a peaceful creature, although if provoked it can be violent. Also with the Scottish wolver, there's no shape-shifting or anything, it just is as it is. Like, it doesn't change, it doesn't evolve from man into wolf, it's just a wolf man. He was covered in short brown hair and he lived in a cave and he loved fishing. Apparently he shared fish with locals that came across him, and sometimes he left fish outside the poor people's houses on their windowsills and stuff. And sometimes, like, if people got lost, he would show them the way and give them directions. He's just a top lad. He had a small rock called the Wolver's Stane, and he would sit on that and do his fishing, and just a dead peaceful guy, wolfman. So that is the Scottish wolver that originated in Shetland, it's said. Again, some people argue this, but I mean, it's a nice story, why can't we have this? Let's now go into more recent-ish Scottish werewolf or wolver sightings. In winter, what was that noise? It sounded like a growl, didn't it? In winter 1952, June Shelley was down at Loch and she said that she saw a large humanoid figure down by the water that had the head of a wolf, but was a man. It was on the edge of the water, lapping up the water, minding its own business. She moved closer to get a better look, and it turned around and looked at her. Like, it stood up, turned around and just stared at her. Understandably, she said it gave her a big fright. This is what she said. She went, it was a horrible look, evil and big pointed ears, and it was so tall, about 7 feet, and then it ran away. Another similar story happened in Oban in 1967. This time a wee postman, Neil Goodman, he was driving to work in the early morning, again in winter, when he saw something coming in the other direction. A tall, man-like figure with wolf features, and he said it ignored him, but it was like bolting down the road at top speed. Just a bit. There are also a lot of similar stories from England, all from like a long time ago. It's really interesting. You can go and find them all online. And then I stumbled across this podcast on YouTube, and it was this guy who interviews people that I guess have seen like cryptids and stuff around the world. And he interviewed this Scottish guy he was only 27. He's a medical researcher from Scotland. It's not even that long ago, this podcast. And he talks about his dogman encounter, and it's really creepy. So he was helping his dad move his mum and dad, and so his grandparents. He was helping them move into sheltered accommodation, which is like, it's not a care home, but it's like a place where they can live independently, live on their own, but they have access to care as well, so it's quite good that way. And this guy as well talks about how he's always been sceptical about this sort of thing, but yeah, that's what I like when I hear these stories. So him and his dad were driving along the road at night, of course. It was near Tarland, I think that's in Aberdeenshire. They saw a big dog crossing from left to right, coming from the forest, and then it sort of walked across the road slowly, and they weren't going that fast, so they could see it all happen. And it kind of went down this wee slope at the side of the road. And he said it had the characteristics of a normal canine. It had, like, for example, the face kind of like a German Shepherd, but it also had really wolf-like features. He described it as if a big German Shepherd and a wolf had a baby, but with other different features that are really weird. He said it had a really, really big face, big, thick black hair, really furry. He said it had really prominent shoulders, which he found unique because you could see its muscles. He said it looked lean. So that's a bit weird in itself, like a really hairy creature where you can see its muscles. And he also, this is what kind of freaked me out, he said its back legs looked kind of broken because they were more bent than usual, but he also said that it was walking normally, like there was no whining, or it didn't look like it was in pain, it was just walking normally, but it had like really weird shaped legs. And he also described it as if it was sort of crawling along the ground, but like moving fine at the same time. So yeah, it threw him off because he said a lot of things just didn't add up at all. Like, it wasn't a normal dog, he knew it. When it walked as well, you could see the shoulder rotation, which he found weird. It didn't look at them, although it was like 30 feet away. And he didn't feel frightened, but at the same time he said he was glad he was in the van. And then it left, and he said he felt like he was in the Twilight Zone because he said it just didn't feel real, it didn't feel right. He's convinced that he saw a dogman. And even his dad, who was even more skeptical than him, agreed that they saw something weird, and he said that he felt like he saw something they weren't supposed to see. And the same guy spoke to policemen and like a couple of gamekeepers and stuff in the area, and they also said they saw some weird dogmen-like creatures, so he felt like they weren't crazy, like other people had experienced it as well. So I think there definitely could be something to it, because all these stories are too specific in particular and similar at the same time that, like, Tarland, like, why Tarland, you know what I mean? It's just weird. I definitely think there's something in this. I don't know, what do you think? I have no idea what I would do if I saw something like that. Like, I would, first of all, probably need the toilet really badly, and then like would have an issue, and then that would probably attract attention to me because I'd be doing it anyway. But if it was in Scotland, then it was likely to be a wolver, surely, and then, you know, maybe I don't like fishing, but I would happily sit with him while he fished and we got to know each other. I don't know, but maybe it's evolved and maybe it's not friendly anymore. I don't know, this was a while back, so maybe werewolves have changed over the years. I don't know. Do you think that there's something to these stories? Do you think it's a load of rubbish? Do you think this podcast's a load of rubbish? Have you ever seen anything like that before? Like, I would love to hear your stories if you've ever seen something weird like that. So yeah, check out Like Conspiracy and let me know what you think. I just found it really interesting, and the way it's written as well, because she's an actual writer, it just makes it more exciting. Yeah, I just find it, I really hope it's real, and I hope there's something to it. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I have a Patreon page if you want to get involved with that. I'm quite active over on my social media. I'll put all the links below to everything. Just tell me your thoughts. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye. How? Werewolves of London.